Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to episode 1 of the Rambling and Gambling podcast. My name is Josh Rosenthal. I'm a Fox 5 DC hard news reporter. However, I'm also a little bit of a downright lousy, very low stakes, degenerate gambler. I pitched my bosses on an idea for a podcast for people like me, and much to my surprise, they said yes, and here we are. The idea is to give picks, strategy, and basic gambling knowledge to people who may not have been interested in betting on sports before, but now, because they're going to be watching the game anyway, and they can bet 5, 10, 20 bucks from their couch on an app on their phone, they want to do it. So we hope that we can impart a little bit of knowledge to folks like that, build a little bit of a community here, and have a heck of a lot of fun, ladies and gents, while we do it. I think we've got a good first episode today. I just did an interview with Captain Jack Andrews. He's a professional gambler. This is his main source of income. He is the co-founder of unabated.com, which is a new sports betting education site. We're going to talk about it a little later. And he also posts educational videos on YouTube for free. They're fantastic. And that is why I thought he would be the perfect guest for this episode today, which is titled Getting Started. Jack, I was listening to a podcast you were on the other day, and you were talking about your site, unabated.com, and you said something along the lines of, you may help people win, but you will at least help them lose less. And I was like, yes, this guy gets it. I cannot wait to talk to Jack, because that's largely what I'm going for with this podcast. For the most part, people probably are not going to get rich listening to this. However, we can help people not lose their tail off, and we can definitely bring in smart people like yourself, who, most importantly to me, can help our listeners have a lot of fun doing this, because I think there's a lot of fun to be had. So Jack, thank you so much for coming on.
Josh, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
You were nice enough to exchange some emails with me ahead of time. And at one point, you compared sports betting to a large, bountiful fruit tree. And I think this is kind of key to where we go from here. So let's start with that. Why is sports betting like a big old fruit tree?
So I use that analogy because a lot of bettors look at sports betting and they go, oh, I'm going to pick the winners of NFL games. That's what I love. I love watching the NFL. I love picking winners. I can decide that there's 16 games on a slate. I'll pick the winners in all 16 of them. Maybe I'll parlay them all together, hit a big score. Well, the truth is the NFL is a very efficient market. In other words, there's not a lot of things out there that you can latch onto that aren't already factored into the market and into the price, the spread on a game. So for a new bettor trying to go after that NFL market is like trying to pick the fruit off the top of a tree, when in fact you can pick a lot of fruit off the lower hanging branches. The low hanging fruit is what it's referred to, right? And that's in the form of other things that are going to be a lot more accessible to a new player, or even to a player like myself that's been around for a while. Go after the low-hanging fruit. Go after the promotions and the bonuses that these sports books are offering to try to buy your loyalty. Go after things like player props. You don't have to handicap the entire game. You can just handicap the running back, right? That seems a lot more, that's a lot less study. That's a lot less effort. And you can maybe come up with a projection for the running back, and you can factor in who they're going against and the type of defense the other team is playing. You see where I'm going with this? You're basically taking a much larger bet, the game, and breaking it down into something that is very finite and very easy to manage. And the sports books won't take as big a limit on a running back prop. However, a new bettor is not looking to bet $10,000 on a game. They're looking to have a nice little sweat for the game. And this can make it a lot more enjoyable experience for them to just target the low-hanging fruit on this big, bountiful tree.
I want to underscore some of what you just said, because I think this is stuff that a lot of our listeners who are new to this can take, and it will immediately pay dividends. The sign-up deals that are happening right now, and it sounds like those are going to increase as we get into the NFL season here in full, or right before the start of it. Can you explain what those are and what they would do for people who are just getting in, looking to set up an account somewhere or in several places?
So sports books are willing to pay to get customers. They call it their customer acquisition cost. And we've seen from public filings from these big sportsbook brands that are coming into the US that they're willing to pay several $100s per customer as a sunk cost because they feel like the long-term value of a customer is much higher than that. And they may be right. So they're willing to put these deals out that seem almost too good to be true. You know, your first bet, if it loses, we'll refund you the full amount up to $1,000. I've seen ones up to $2,000, $5,000, which seems the average bettor looks at that and goes, come on, there's got to be a catch. Well, yeah, there is a catch, because if they refund the money, it's in the form of a free bet that you have to then bet again sometime. However, that's it. That's the whole catch. And a new bettor can really look at something like this and they go, well, this sportsbook A is giving me $1,000 risk-free. Sportsbook B is giving me $1,000 risk-free. Well, if I bet both sides of one game, you know, one at each sportsbook, I can't lose, right? I'm gonna make $1,000 win or lose there. And yeah, that's true. That's absolutely true. So my key to new bettors is always sign up for all these deals, and as best of your ability within your bankroll, within your means, max out the sign up bonuses. If they're offering a $500 free bet, but you're only a $100 bettor, or maybe even less than that, see if you can do the $500 version of it, because that's going to be a bankroll boost for you going forward. And, you know, a lot of bettors kind of come back from this and go, oh, I didn't realize that those deals were so lucrative. I'm like, yeah, that can cover up, you know, a whole month or season's worth of losing in the NFL by just taking advantage of a really good sign-up deal. And the sign-up deals are the best right at the beginning of the NFL, which is where we're at, as well as just before March Madness, because that's the other time people think about sports gambling. And so this is a great time to look into it.
They're literally paying you to sign up for their book, largely, I presume, because this is such a competitive marketplace. They want your business and they're hoping that you will stick with them. Is that a fair summation?
Yes, that's absolutely it. We've seen in markets where there is no competition, we don't see the good promotions and bonuses and signups. But however, in a market that does have a bit of competition, these sports books are definitely cutthroat in trying to get the loyalty. Because here's the thing, Josh, there's been studies and the average sports bettor uses one, maybe two sports books. And if you're in an area that has multiple brands, they're going to have to fight hard to be your primary or your secondary. Guys like me, I use every sports book possible. You know, I've got accounts all over the place. But for the average recreational bettor, they just go, oh, I got this one app, I got this other app, I'm good. And so that's why these sports books try to work so hard to get their loyalty.
I could see a lot of people saying, well, that's great, Jack, you're a professional gambler. This is what you do. Of course, you have a bunch of books. I'm not that serious. I don't want to open up several accounts. Why do I need DraftKings if I've already got FanDuel? There is another angle to this, though, too, right? In addition to being able to take advantage of multiple sign-up deals, which, like we talked about, are very plentiful right now, you can also line shop, which I gather from listening to your pods, your YouTube stuff, it's really important. Could you explain what line shopping is and why even a new recreational bettor would have an interest in doing this?
Sure, it's just a matter of being an informed consumer. These sports books don't always all put the same price on a market. In other words, the line on the Washington football team may be -3 here, and it might be -3.5 here. You need to shop around and you need to see who's got the best price. Just as if you were consuming any product, you would always look around and see, well, who's got the best price on this? Since all of these are apps, or they don't really require you to travel great distances to make the wager, it's worth your time to line shop and find who has the best line and then bet into that, because sports betting does have a house edge. In other words, you know, if you're just flipping a coin in your sports betting picks, which the majority of recreational bettors are, you will lose over time due to the VIG, the vigorish, the house edge. And if you can do whatever you can to reduce that VIG that you're playing up against, you've got a much better shot to be more sustainable, to last longer, And then we factor in those bonuses and promotions, and you might break even or come out ahead. And that's why I always talk about, let's lose less. Let's not necessarily win. Let's lose less.
You mentioned NFL games being up at the top of the tree, the fruit that's kind of hard to get to. I will admit, I love a good 3-team NFL parlay when I'm betting on Washington, Green Bay, and New England at the same time. It always looks great when you get those odds that are like, I'm risking $5 to win 60. Here's my brutally honest question for you, Jack. Does that make me a chump? You can be real with me. I can take it. Does that make me a chump?
No, Josh, it absolutely doesn't. Everybody loves to bet the NFL. The NFL is built for betting. It probably has a history of kind of encouraging that in many ways with how they handle things. And if you want to bet a few parlays here and there, that's fine. I would caution you that when you bet a parlay, you are basically compounding the house edge, much like an investment that as it rolls over time, you compound that interest. Well, when you do a parlay bet, you're taking the 5% house edge and you're combining it with another 5% house edge and another 5% house edge. And it has a multiplier effect on that rather than just adding those edges together. And that's detrimental to your long-term sustainability. However, there is such a thing as just being a recreational bettor, as just having an entertainment tax when you're betting. This is something to enhance your enjoyment. You're willing to pay this entertainment tax, which is the house edge, and have a nice sweat. Now, where I think it crosses the line is when we move into the lottery mentality. And that's what a lot of sports books are going to encourage you to do. They're going to say, hey, Josh, instead of that $5 to win 60, wouldn't it be cool if you had $5 to win 50,000? And they promote these astronomically insane 12, 14 team wagers that might include a couple props in there to make it seem a little bit more attainable. And it gets people in that lottery mentality of like, oh, this is just like a scratcher from the lottery. I just put up $5 and I might win huge. Well, you're never going to win. It's very, very, very rare that people win those huge wagers. That's why they publicize them so much. And it's best to just avoid that lottery mentality and go about sports betting as, you know what, this is a little bit of a grind, but it enhances my enjoyment each Sunday afternoon. And that's why I do it.
That is how I look at a lot of the bets I make. I purposefully do not bet so much money that if I lose, I'm going to be in a bad mood the rest of the day. But I do really like putting that $10 on Washington or whoever else that I'm watching that night, that day, regardless. And I say, this helps me enjoy the game just that little bit more than I already would. And if I lose it, okay, I'll deal. That's the entertainment tax that you're talking about.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's just about what you're comfortable betting and what's within the limits of sanity in terms of your expectation. We already know the NFL is very hard to beat. So if you're parlaying a bunch of things together, you're only making it more difficult on yourself. But hey, if you enjoy the sweat, then that's a good way to sweat out an afternoon.
You mentioned player performance props as one type of bet that may make some sense for a new recreational gambler to make. That's when you are betting on, team A's running back to have over or under 89 rushing yards in a game, say. Are there any other types of bets that you would recommend new bettors stick to or go for?
I always recommend to bettors to always look for bets that have a winner and a loser. A popular gimmick that a lot of sports books do is they offer a one-sided bet. In other words, they only offer, will this happen in a game? They don't let you bet the no, they only let you bet the yes. And there's too much of an incentive for the sports book to offer that at a substandard line because they don't have to worry about people betting the other side. We see it a lot with promotions and bet boosts that a lot of these sports books do. There was one the other day is, will someone throw a complete game today in Major League Baseball? And it was a day where there was only 5 Major League Baseball games. Well, if you watch Major League Baseball these days, complete games are pretty rare. There's not a whole lot of pitchers that are left in the game that long. And this sports book was saying you could only bet the yes at, originally they had -125, which was a laughably bad number, but then later they changed it to 7-1 plus 700, You bet $10, you'd win $70 if somebody threw a complete game that day. But you couldn't bet the no. You couldn't say, no, nobody will bet a complete game that day. And if you were to do the math and factor it all out, that was a pretty bad bet to take that, even as a bet boost. And as a result, you often fall into that trap. So what I tell a lot of new bettors is don't even look at things that only have a one-way line. Look at things that have a two-way line. The sportsbook has to be more fair and honest about their pricing when there's a chance that somebody's going to bet the no as well as the yes.
A lot of our bettors are going to be in the Maryland, DC, Virginia area. So I want to talk about the local betting markets briefly. Maryland, where I live, gambling is coming. It sounds like pretty soon. Virginia, in my view, pretty competitive marketplace. It's where I do my gambling now, even though I'm a Maryland resident. And I don't want to belabor the point here, Jack, but I do think this is important to get out there for our listeners. Can you describe the gambling community's general view or perception of the DC sports betting market as it stands now?
I'll give you an optimistic view, Josh, about the DC betting market. It's getting better. So DC passed a law where the DC lottery runs the sports betting, the mobile sports betting within the district. And as a result, if you want to bet on your phone, you only have one choice. You have the DC Lotteries app. And they also teamed up with a company that doesn't really promote competitive sports betting. They tend to offer lines that are just horrible on both sides. And the reason for this is they wanted to return a high tax revenue to the district. However, the problem is sports bettors look at this and go, oh, this line's horrible, I'm not going to bet it. So they're actually getting a lot less volume through on the DC Gambet app. However, things are improving because part of this law in DC is you can bet at the sports complexes, Nationals Park and Capital One Arena and so on. And then there's also going to be bars that have kiosks. Now the kiosks are going to be with the DC Lottery product, so that's substandard. But for instance, at the arena, at the Capital One Arena, you can bet at what is now the Caesars Sportsbook, and it's a huge, beautiful sportsbook, and it's competitive lines. It's the same lines you'd find at the Caesars Sportsbooks in Vegas. At Nationals Park, I believe it's BetMGM, and as long as you are in, I believe, a 2-block radius of that park, you can bet on your phone. So if you're willing to hop all over DC, and I've been through DC plenty of times, the traffic doesn't make that too easy. However, you can still bet at these larger sports books. There's more coming as well. So there's a chance that it's still going to be a bit competitive in DC, just not as competitive as something like Virginia or Maryland.
I'll put it to you like this, Jack. I live in Maryland. I am in DC every single day. And yet when it comes to betting with a mobile app, which is what I primarily do, I think most bettors probably do, I choose to drive into Virginia, where you have a much more competitive marketplace. And this is not an opinion, this is just a fact. If you look at the odds for a game on the DC app, and then you go into Virginia and you look at the odds for the same game, very, very, very oftentimes they're different. Also, very frequently, more of a selection in Virginia as far as the types of bets that you can make, whereas they may not be offered at all in DC. Fair?
Yes, absolutely. The Virginia product is very good. It's very competitive. You have all the major players there. The Maryland product is going to be as good as that. You're going to have all the major players. The tax rate is such for the operators that they can offer decent promotions and wagers. Maryland might actually have a few more options than Virginia has, because Maryland is setting the bar pretty low in terms of barrier to entry for the market for operators. There may be as many as 60 operators in Maryland. Now, there won't be, because that's just too saturated of a market for something that size. However, that at least they're letting that upper bound be high enough that they have room to grow, which is really great for consumers, because the more competition equals the more innovation equals the more capitalism that these sports books are going to pursue after, which is great for the consumer. It's a lot more options for you.
Jack, I know that you generally do not like giving out picks And I respect it. Give me a brief explanation. Why do you not like giving out picks?
Josh, it's the teach a man to fish or give him a fish analogy. In other words, if you give a man a fish, he is satisfied for a day, but he's hungry tomorrow. If you teach a man to fish, he never goes hungry a day in his life, assuming he's near water. And I feel that way about sports picks, because if you rely on tailing somebody else, you didn't learn anything. You didn't make yourself better at this for the next time. And there is a fallacy of following other people's picks, especially if it's somebody that's popular, because they will move the market and you'll get the worst of it. And the margins in sports betting, especially from the better side, are razor thin. It's really tough to get an edge and maintain your edge. So if you're getting the worst number based on tailing somebody else's picks, you're probably not going to be a winning sports bettor in the long run. So I much more encourage people to learn something about sports betting rather than just follow blindly. That's my theory anyway.
All right, here's a different idea. And if you're not into this, we can just edit it out. Can I tell you some bets that I am thinking about making? I'll explain what I like about them, and then you help me understand whether my logic is sound, if I'm heading down the right path, or if I need to adjust how I'm coming at it. So you don't actually have to tell me whether or not you like the bet itself. I want you to comment as much, if not more, on the process, how I'm going about doing this. You like that? Are you into this?
I like that, Josh. I'm all about the process. I think that's a great way to approach it. Let's go.
My man, here we go. Okay, number one, Washington football team, the home team around here, over 8.5 wins for the season, plus 100 on FanDuel. That means I am risking $100 to profit $100. Here's what I like about it. I expect the defense to be as good as last year, if not better. They're returning all their players, the key ones, and adding a couple of nice pieces too. I think Ryan Fitzpatrick's going to be a huge upgrade over Dwayne Haskins and Alex Smith. In particular, he can make throws downfield. We had a ton of trouble with that last season. They went 0-3 last year in games decided by a field goal or less. I expect some positive regression there. 17 games this season, not 16. And also, I think the NFC East is going to stink again. So you add all that up, I think Washington goes from 7 wins last season to 9 or more this season. I think there's a really good chance that they win the division again. What do you think of my bet and the process?
Okay. So that is a very qualitative analysis. There's 2 types of ways you can go about sports betting. There's qualitative, which means, you see something and you react. And then there's quantitative, which is like numbers based. And you just gave me a very qualitative analysis, which is great. Qualitative is just as valid as quantitative. But it's also based on your opinion of how you feel things should go. For instance, the regression on close games. You feel like, we're due to be better. A lot of people look at like turnover luck and say, hey, we lost so many fumbles and interceptions last year. That's all luck based, and we're due to be better. So that's a little bit of a red flag. I don't hate your bet though. I think that I agree the NFC East is going to be another dumpster this year, and Washington has just as good a chance to win as anyone else. And to win it, you need probably 9 wins this year at minimum in a 17-game season. So it's good to think about that. Here's my improvement on your bet, Josh.
Okay.
A lot of sports books offer these season win bets as the season goes on. So sit down and look at the Washington schedule and say, here is where the schedule gets tough and here's where it gets easier. And in other words, if they go through a tough part, they may have a worse record than they really are. And if they have an easy part coming up, they may get some wins that might not be accounted in the line. And you can look at that and go, well, if Washington gets off to like a 1-3 start, I don't know their schedule to know if this is valid. That might be a good time to be high on Washington, to make the bet. Look at that schedule. I know they have a tough gauntlet at the end of the season. So you might want to also think about like making an over bet. And then if they're doing really well heading into that tough gauntlet, you can hedge out and maybe get under 10.5 or under 10 or 9 and go for a middle there. So there's a lot of options there. I would encourage you to think about some of those options with that season bet.
That's great advice. So even if you want to bet over or under on a team wins, it may be, depending on the circumstances, advantageous to wait until a certain part of the season, especially depending on strength of schedule, before you make that bet. Am I hearing you right?
Right. Every team is different, and they all have high points and low points of their schedule. So it's almost like evaluating a stock, and you go, oh, here's a good place to buy, here's a good place to sell, and you go about your sports betting that way.
Okay, nice. All right, this is good. I'm learning. Here's number 2, and this might be a little questionable, but here you go. I'm really almost certainly, if I'm being honest with you, Jack, going to bet this NFL preseason Steelers Thursday night plus 100 to beat the Eagles straight up. Here's my angle. I know it's preseason. However, the Steelers played last week against the Cowboys in the Hall of Fame game. I lost a few bucks on that one. I lost $5. Even if Big Ben doesn't play again this week, they're going to have a lot of guys taking the field for the second time. None of the Philly guys have done that. They've not played a game yet. Philly also had a lot of turnover this offseason. So what I'm betting on is I think that little bit of seasoning, even in a preseason game, could make all the difference in the world. I'm putting a tiny little taste, the tiniest little smallest amount on Pittsburgh to win. What do you think?
All right, again, we're talking qualitative analysis here. However, there is a quantitative angle here that should be factored in, and that is some coaches just don't care about preseason. And Mike Tomlin's one of them. And historically, and I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but there are numbers, new coaches do care. They're trying to get their first win, whether that be preseason or regular season, but they're really trying to prove something, especially to a home crowd. And this is Nick Sirianni's first game as head coach of the Eagles. The game's in Philadelphia. I think he's going to at least try to win the game, which a lot of these NFL coaches really don't care about winning and losing a preseason game. So there is that going against it. I don't hate the bet, but I don't think there's too much of an angle there just based on the Steelers having gone through this last Thursday. Dwayne Haskins looked good last Thursday, though. That was interesting for Pittsburgh. But anyway, I don't hate your bet, but I wouldn't make it myself.
Would you stay away from betting preseason altogether?
Yeah. Don't get too wrapped up in preseason. It's fun, especially like last Thursday. It was the only game that was on, and I turned it on, and I was like, I do want to make a bet on this. So I did bet on Pittsburgh last week, and yeah, it's fun. Here's the thing: don't get too wrapped up in preseason, because really these teams don't try to win. There's a lot of different angles you can still do with preseason. For instance, bettors always hear that in football, the 3 and the 7 are worth a whole lot. And that's true on the spread. However, in preseason, because really neither team is trying to run up too much of a score, the lower numbers are actually worth more. The 1 and the 2 are worth more. And you see a lot of these games are going to be lined at like one team -1 or -2, sometimes up to 3, rarely more than that. So, keep that in mind and keep the games close, and, don't be afraid to bet with something that you just want to watch for entertainment value. But at the same time, just don't get too wrapped up in preseason. They don't get too wrapped up in it. Neither should you.
Last one I have for you, and I really want to hear what you think of the logic behind this one. I'm bringing it up because I do think, especially for new recreational bettors, this is the way a lot of us think. August 22nd, Manny Pacquiao makes his return to the ring, taking on Errol Spence Jr., who is -215 to win. So I risk $215 to win $100 profit. Here's why I want to bet it. My brother, big boxing guy, he says there is 0 chance Manny wins. He says, lay the 215. Don't worry about it. Bet it, bet it, bet it. The producer of this podcast, Parrish Smith, my partner in crime, he says, no way Manny wins. Bet Spence all the way. These are the only 2 boxing fans in my life, and they're both adamant about this. So am I insane for potentially throwing a few bucks at this for that reason, even though I personally don't really know much about boxing?
Man, boxing is the ultimate qualitative analysis. It really is. People have opinions, MMA as well. People have opinions about fighting matches, and numbers go out the window. I'm not a big boxing fan, so I don't have really an opinion on this. However, I've seen enough betting on these sports to know the public is usually on the wrong side. And the fact that there's often heavy favorites in boxing, they get away with it because, you know, they're laying maybe 10-1 on somebody, and really the true odds should be more like 6-1. And, you know, they get away with it because the person still wins like 83% of the time. I read recently that Vegas is way overweight on Pacquiao. They have a lot of liability on Pacquiao, like 7-figure liability at each of the sports books out there on Pacquiao. That tells me that, you know, the public is, for the most part, on Pacquiao, but you've got two experts in your life, or I'm going to use air quotes there with experts,
that's safe, yeah.
Yeah, who are both very much against it. I don't know. Josh, if you definitely have to, if you're going to be watching the fight and you want to have a little sweat on it, it sounds like you have the right way to go betting the favorite. But man, I wouldn't want to be sitting on August 22nd and say, okay, I need to bet this. Which side should I bet? Don't go into that, man. Fighting matches are just too tough to handicap, especially for people that aren't really connected to the industry. And I would take a pass on this one.
Given that you now have a little bit of insight into how my very qualitative mind works, do you have any advice for me and the people listening to this as far as betting process goes, how to go about formulating a bet, coming up with what I and others want to bet on?
Josh, I would advise you that you have a very keen eye when it comes to sports betting, given your, you know, the field of work you're in. And that's not a bad thing. You understand what it is to be kind of unbiased in viewpoints, and that's not a bad thing as well. That's all things that are very needed in qualitative analysis. If you want to get into something a bit more quantitative, it's just a matter of like doing the research on, do the numbers back this up? Do the stats back this up? Let me see if, you know, we'll go back to that running back prop we were talking about. Going back to all the game logs from this and maybe last season and saying, you know, well, how often did this prop actually win against similar opponents and things like that, and try to take just an unbiased numbers view of the situation. It's probably not bad for you in the long run to mix in a little bit of quantitative analysis to go with your qualitative.
This sounds like a really good segue into talking about your website, unabated.com. What is it? Give me the pitch.
So, Josh, we have a website that I've created with another professional sports bettor. His name's Rufus Peabody. He is actually from the DC area. You should probably have him on sometime.
Very well-known guy. Very well-known.
Yes. He is one of the all-time greats in terms of sports betting. He's made a lot of money with sports betting. And we decided we need to create a site that helps bettors quantify some of their opinions that they have on sports betting. And we have three main pillars to our site. The first is we have some trading tools. So remember earlier when I said, if you're line shopping, you might see a -3 versus a -3.5. How do you know which one is the better line? Well, if they're both priced the same in terms of the VIG, yeah, -3 is clearly better than -3.5. But what if it's -3 -110 and -3.5 plus 105? You can put numbers into some of our trading tools and you can find out that one is better than the other. In that case, -3 -110 would be better. A lot of trading tools that help the recreational plus gambler, the one that wants to take their game to the next level, to kind of quantify their opinions and see if there's a better way to be doing things than they already are. And then another major pillar of our site is we have an NFL simulator, and this is really probably our flagship product, where you can enter in power ratings for each team and then have it simulate out the season 10,000 times to see what happens. See how many wins Washington does wind up with if you set all the power ratings correctly. And if you're not the kind of person that has power ratings, we'll let you import from various sources. You can import from ESPN's FPI ratings. You can import from other websites around. And then there's Massey Peabody Analytics, which is one of Rufus's other companies, where they do analytical deep dives into sports betting, into sports. and they have power ratings, which have proven to be very successful over the years. And you can simulate out the season. And just the other day, I was simulating out Carson Wentz with the Colts. How do they look with him? How do they look without him? How many games is he going to miss? What if he misses just the first 5 games? How does their season play out 10,000 times over? And I made some bets based on that information. And then the other major part of our site is going to be an odds screen, which gives you real-time information about what the market maker books are doing. In other words, there are certain sports books that set the market. They're the ones where the price change is there and everybody else follows. And we're compiling a list of those books and giving you a real-time odds screen so you can see when the most influential books are moving their lines. And maybe you have an account at a book that doesn't move as fast, and you can kind of use that as a competitive tool. Like if they're moving on Washington here, I can still get a slightly better price at Sportsbook B on Washington by keeping an eye on this odds screen. So it's sort of like a little cheat sheet for bettors to kind of keep up with the market and which way it's moving. There's on top of that, there's a bunch of educational pieces all over the site that's sort of my role in this whole thing, is educating bettors who want to improve their game, who want to go from being always a loser on every Sunday to maybe losing less and maybe having some winning Sundays, and maybe being more sustainable as a bettor so that they can be have more enjoyable of a process in their betting.
I love that. And I'm really excited about the site. I signed up for updates. Is the plan still to launch within like a matter of weeks now?
Yes, we will be fully live before the NFL season kicks off. If you go to unabated.com and you sign up for our early access, you will get in sometime this month. We're working our way from the beginning of when we offered that page up till now, first come, first serve. And we're letting in a few hundred people per day. And we'll ramp that up. And once the site seems to be stable, we're going to get it up to maybe a few thousand per day. Got a lot of people that have signed up for this. It's very exciting. And there's going to be a community aspect too. So we'll get a community of people that all want to be moving towards the same thing, and we'll bring them together. And I think it's going to be a really great site. So if you sign up today, you will definitely get in sometime in August, and you can use our simulator to find some season-long bets, figure out if that Washington over 8.5 is a good bet or not based on simulating out the season 10,000 times.
Sounds good to me. Jack, you are crushing this, man. Can I throw a few, just like a handful of quick hitters at you before we go?
Yes, do it.
All right. Any advice on how people should decide how much to bet, and would you recommend having a set unit size?
Okay, so this is a mistake a lot of people make, is they overbet their bankroll. And there's different ways you can go about this, but here's my rule of thumb. Never bet more than 1% of your total bankroll. Now, what is your total bankroll though? Well, that's the amount of money you can afford to lose before you're forced out of the betting game altogether. So, for some people that might be a big number because they go, oh, I can always replenish this bankroll, but be realistic with yourself. Try to definitely think realistically about what you plan to do with money, where your money really needs to go. Don't make too big of a bankroll. And then per game, bet no more than 1% of your bankroll, and you'll be in good shape for the long-term sustainability.
Any thoughts on in-game live betting?
It's really exciting. In-game betting is probably the best place to go if you feel like you can get an edge, because sportsbooks adjust, and the pre-game odds are always adjusted as more information hits the market. But when you have in-game odds, they don't have time to adjust. They have to put it up based on what they know. And you can find inefficiencies in the market a lot easier in-game betting than you can in pre-game betting. The difference is it's gone fast because either the game's still going on, maybe it's just at halftime, maybe it's between quarters. So it's not as always easy to get down on the bet, but the inefficiencies are there in-game betting.
I know you're big on season-long contests. What are they? Why do you think we're going to see more of them in the future?
Season-long contests are great, Josh, because it gives a fan a fixed price and they have engagement all season long, unless they really flop out of the contest early and they give up. But I think it's a great way to get a lot of bang for your buck in terms of the bettor. You might have to pick 5 games each week over the course of the season. And there's a difference between just betting strategy as opposed to tournament strategy. And with season-long bets, season-long contests, you can often find a lot of situations where you get up against people that are going at it in betting strategy in as opposed to tournament strategy. I'll give you a quick example. DraftKings had a contest last year, and heading into the final week of the contest, I was in like 19th place, and so I had to find a way that if all the chips fell where they could go, I could get to first place, and that meant betting on some really bad teams that nobody else would want to bet on at some really bad lines, because I knew that I had to take that contrarian strategy. And I made a path for myself. And when I checked everyone else's picks, I had a path to the $1 million, to the top prize. I just barely missed, but at least I had a path. And I felt good about that, is that I had a path to $1 million, whereas everybody else had kind of gone with the status quo teams. They didn't have a path to $1 million from 19th place. So, I ended up falling short. I still got decent money out of it, but that's sort of like the tournament strategy that goes into it.
Who sets opening lines and why do they move?
Okay, so the opening lines are really a misnomer. Yes, there is a place that probably puts up the line first, but it's really the bettors that shape the line, and the influential bettors, the people that are the sharps. Sports books like to profile the sharp bettors, and they know, well, if this guy is on this side, we need to move our line because he's usually on the winning side. So that's what happens, and that happens all around the world. In other words, the sports betting market is not just DC and Virginia and Maryland and the US. It's offshore, it's overseas, it's Europe, it's Asia, it's around the world, and it's going 24/7. And so the prices are pretty much hammered into place nonstop over time. And that's why there's, when people say, oh, Vegas knows when the line lands real close. No, Vegas didn't know. Maybe offshore knew or something, but it was really the conglomerate of bettors worldwide knew. And that's what sets the market efficiency. So there's really no one place that it ever originates consistently. And each sport has different market makers. One book may be really sharp in NFL, and another book may be really sharp in college football. It really varies around the world.
Lots of books offer odds boosts right now. So for instance, one recently that I bid on was something like Rory, Dustin Johnson, and Koepka to all make the cut at some tournament. I thought it looked like easy money. It was not. Are odds boosts for suckers?
No, they're not for suckers. They are not always what they seem to be. And if you're going to play the odds boost, you can't really play them blindly. I gave that example of that. Will there be a complete game thrown? And they had a horrible lineup there for that. So odds boosts aren't always a boost. You need to find a way to be able to quantify it and figure out what your edge is. A lot of times they are really good. They are a positive expected value for you, but you can't really play them blindly though.
Any final words of wisdom before we go?
Sports betting is one of those things where if you try hard, if you put the work in, if you put the effort in, if you're disciplined, you can get an edge. You can beat this market. And that's really exciting, especially for a lot of American players, because this is something that people are saying, hey, we know you already love sports. We're going to give you a way to profit on it. And it's really an exciting opportunity for US players. And I would encourage people to put the time and effort and discipline into it. I have a lot of people that have come back to me and go, man, because of your videos, because of your writing, I have taken my game to the next level. And my family was just able to go on a big vacation to Disney World because I had this money that I had earned from sports betting. That's great. I mean, that's great. There's not many things in this world where your hobby can turn into a profitable hobby. So I encourage people to, if they want to go that path, go for it.
Captain Jack Andrews, unabated.com. You're the man. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Josh. It was a pleasure.
All right. There it is. Episode 1 in the books. I got to tell you, that was fun. I'm pretty pumped about this. I hope you enjoyed it too. Check me out on Instagram. I started an account at Rambling and Gambling. Type in Rambling and Gambling. You will find me. I haven't actually posted anything yet, but I'm going to get on it. My plan there is to kind of post picks as I make them during the week. I will tell you right now, there are likely to be more losers there than winners, but I think we can have some fun with it. I hope people will give me input as well, so check that out. And I hope you'll come back next week, of course, for episode 2. We're going to do an NFC football preview. That's my plan for week 2. Week 3, my plan is to do an AFC preview, basically getting prepared for the NFL football season, which, personally speaking, is my absolute favorite thing to bet on. So I think we're starting this podcast at a really great time. Hope you had fun with this one too. And yeah, like I said, thanks for trying this out. See you next week.